name's Gavin Brooks. Let's talk about sweeping technique. First, we're going to talk about the things you'll hear all over the place. Good places to start if you're not familiar with sweeping at all. And then we'll get into the more nuanced stuff, things I'm really passionate about, things that will help if you want to sweep as fast as possible and as clean as possible, like extreme metal type of stuff. First, let's talk about the role of each hand. Left hand, you have to respect how hard it is. The reason it's hard is because we require the same accuracy we normally do when we play fast stuff, but now we have this added challenge of moving vertically with precision. Consider the motion in a generic A minor sweep. We have pinky, index, middle, pinky. If we put that all in one string, it sounds like this. So if you're trying to do fast sweeping, we want to make sure we can just move the fingers fast already. Those fingers have to also intelligently move through different strings vertically. So of course it's great to just do it left hand only, and you'll need to make sure you're controlling each finger individually. We don't want to hear numerous notes ringing out at the same time. For the right hand, it needs to feel different from normal picking, specifically in a easier way, in a gentler way. I really recommend feeling like you're just brushing the tops of the strings. If I were to literally pick through an arpeggio just with downstroke, it has a different sound and feeling. That's the thing I'll want to use sometime. But it's not going to look the same as a more relaxed sweep motion, because the sweep motion feels nothing like normally picking. I really recommend you notice this too on the first stroke that starts the sweep. A lot of people have a problem starting the sweep with a pick stroke and then trying to turn it into the sweep motion. Start with the motion of the sweep, which I basically recommend having almost no motion going on in the hand and fingers. If you can, try to derive the motion more from a coarse motor group like the wrist and the arm. We'll talk more about that later. So for most beginners, I just recommend chew on lots of different sweep shapes, move them through the key. That's an important thing a lot of people don't do. Make sure you play those diminished arpeggios as well as your minor and major ones. But sweeping, I think, is really one of those things where it feels quite different at slow speeds and fast speeds. So you can develop a technique that's going to work for you at a slower speed, which is the speed you inevitably have to play when you're first picking it up, a speed like this. But of course, once we get faster, we'll find that it actually just becomes more of like a single strumming motion that is controlled. And to get used to that, I recommend single directional bursts. So something like a... Now I want to zoom in and talk about what the picking hand should actually look like and this idea of arm motion. So I heard some ideas out there recently that I really didn't like to hear, about someone saying that you have to change the direction of your pick when you go in each direction. Obviously you watched me sweep a lot already in this video. I don't change direction. My picking hand is the easiest, most relaxed part of this whole thing. All the pressure is on my left hand. And that's what makes it feel like there really isn't a speed limit. The speed limit is here. Of course, there are great players who do have a bit of this kind of thing going on in their direction. I'm going to mainly shout out Yo Onitian, who I think is a extremely, extremely good metal guitar player, much better than me. And when he sweeps, you do see this kind of back and forth motion, but notice that he is still pivoting on a pinky held somewhere down here by a pickup on the bottom string, whatever it is. However, there's a lot of people that you should also look to, including myself, and I'm going to shout out David Shreds. I think this is his tag from Instagram. This is another guy that I think is insanely, insanely good, a real proper metal guitar player. And if you look at the way he sweeps, it's completely from arm motion, and it doesn't look any different. And of course, if you think about it logically, if we want to get a motion as efficient as possible, if it just looks one way and you don't have to change anything when you're going in a different direction, it's going to be very easy to speed up. And to get used to this really efficient sweep motion from the right hand, I recommend just muting with your left hand and just feeling what it's like to go through all the strings. You can even do a smaller amount of them, but just trying to find this fluid motion. The important thing here is the picking depth. I've said it before, brush the top of the strings. You don't want to be going in too deep. I had a okay sweeping technique that I used for lots of years, and that I was able to play sweep arpeggios up to a certain speed, but it was very intense and stressful on the right hand because I was picking so freaking deep. And I also had this thing where it looked different in each direction, so I consciously rebuilt my technique because I wanted this to not be a barrier at all when it comes to sweeping. Now I want to talk more specifically about this idea of arm motion. I'm a big advocate for arm motion in terms of sweeping and alternate picking. And the reason is that you can get pretty far without arm motion for both of these things up to a certain tempo where I think a lot of people then cap out. I was one of those people who then capped out if I tried to restrict my motion only to pivoting from the wrist for alternate picking or for sweeping. And look, as far as a lot of people are concerned, 160 BPM, 16th notes, playing cleanly, that's pretty fast. And look, it is fast. Doing that clean, I respect anyone who does that. However, when we start getting into these dangerously fast territories, let's say 200 BPM, it's harder to find a lot of people at that tempo who only pick, let's say, from wrist or finger motion with no assistance from the arm. Something like this kind of speed. As you get used to playing very fast with arm motion, there is a way that you realize you can start to relax into a more wrist motion, less arm motion intensive technique. So you can see arm motion as a way to get over the hurdle, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily stuck with it. I've found this already in my alternate picking, is that there's times where I've been playing for a couple hours where I feel like, wait, it's coming a lot easier and more simple from the wrist motion, but that's not something I was able to get to just by taking wrist motion at 150 BPM and increasing the metronome by 5 BPM and hoping somehow it gets there, because the feeling of that technique down there is just different. Apologies for being so long-winded, but I really have the same perspective here with sweeping, especially if we're just trying to do some big, nasty. The arm is fantastic at that. So let's talk about one of the most important facets of this, which is having good string muting technique. And a lot of people, a lot of the top tutorials I saw just a second ago, searching incognito on YouTube for like, what are the sweep tutorials out there? A lot of those people giving their advice had very little string muting control, but they were selling it to you well because they were playing on lower gain, so you're less likely to hear it ring out, or they know the ways to control it. For example, you can always choose certain areas on the fretboard where we're less likely to pick up on sort of the natural resonances of the open string. Of course, they could also be using a fret wrap out of frame. There's all sorts of ways. But here's the thing. Look, if you don't have your sights set for like super intense metal playing, it's fine. You know, and we can always bring up Marty Friedman as a guy who has very little string muting control when he plays lead. And you can watch him. He's a masterclass in pulling off, hiding the open strings ringing out. Part of it is just that if we don't want to deal with low strings muting, you always can just pick the notes harder up here. I'm going to try to play without muting. If I dig in enough, you don't hear the stuff ringing. And a lot of people just control their open string ringing out by quickly muting it after they're done playing. So like some kind of... that mutes it, or a... right? Or... So enough of me complaining about people who don't mute. How can we do it? If this is something you care about, is we can practice the sweeping motion, but understanding that our palm needs to be muting each string right after we play it. So if I start from my A string, right now I'm resting on my low E. I'm muting my low E. As I go to my D string, as I push through, my hand slowly drops down to the point where I'm now muting the A string that I was just on. So A string is picked, I move down. You're going to hear it get muted. I'm about to pick the D string. You're going to hear it get muted. I'm about to pick the G string. And this happens in real time, where by the time we're at the end, nothing is ringing. And this is just general muting technique. If we want the strings towards the ground muted, we use our left hand technique. If we have strings above what we're playing that need muting, it's right hand technique. It's really as simple as doing that kind of exercise I just showed you, building your muting technique so that by the time you're up here, high up, you're muting the low strings. Just be conscious of it. And here are a few kind of thoughtful ways to practice your sweeps in more ways than just playing them over and over again. One of the most effective ways to practice sweeps is to cut them up. If we take the most common minor shape there, C minor, think about all the different ways we can do this. We can do the full range. We can do a smaller range. See that one a lot. We can do this one, which adds up to 8 if we play it seamlessly, which is nice and usable. We can do one that adds to 6. And of course, one that adds to 4. You can literally just practice those in loops, but try also to connect them, right? So to do maybe one to the next, like a... just really helps calibrate things. And of course, if you're daring, you can do the opposite from the low end. Let's see if I don't totally mess this up. Once you already have some good general sweeping comfortability, a great challenge is just to try actually applying a pattern to it. So for example, like 3 notes descending, And the next set from the second highest note of the group. Right, A. And then one final suggestion, especially for smaller sweep shapes, is just to play them in one direction over and over again. For example, high to low, or low to high. If you put it on the neck pickup, it's just like cheating, basically. So I'm still trying to get good here. If you're interested in private guitar lessons, I'm looking to fill up my schedule right now. You can message me on Instagram.com/GavinBrooks100. Also, if you're interested in learning all your scale shapes, arpeggios, and basic theory, check out my Essential Rock Metal Theory course linked in the description. Thanks for watching.